Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Recently, I got a cat. His name's Frankie. He's the most adorable little thing. He's wonderful. I can't wait for you to meet him, Bruce.
He's pretty cute. And I'm glad you named him already, because I have a tendency to take the names of... when my friends get pets, and they don't name them right away, because they want to see what the personality of the pet is first, I immediately name their cat after a meal. So one of my friends, their cat's name was Lunch, and their dog's name was Dinner. And after they named their cat and dog, I continue to call them Lunch and Dinner for almost a year.
Lunch is a fantastic name for a cat. I kind of want to start calling him Frankie Lunch now. Wow. I think my wife's going to hate that.
I think Frankie is a very appropriate name for your cat.
Yeah, I mean, it was the name he came with. He's 2 years old. Figured, might as well not change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all of this brings us to today's topic, pet cards. The way I see pet cards, they're adjacent to staples. So staples are the cards that you more or less put in almost any deck according to color and whatever.
If pet cards are adjacent to staples, does that make them paper clips?
Yeah, exactly. They're they hold your deck together, right? That's how I keep my decks together is
paper clips. Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. Like, they're just kind of cards that you, whether intentionally or not, kind of try to force into any deck that would allow them.
I think the other part of pet deck is you have to like the card. There are some cards that I put in a lot of decks that I wouldn't call it a pet card. We were just talking before we started. A card like Hearthstone. Hearthstone is an artifact. It reduces cost of an activated ability, and then there's another rider that says it can't become less than one. But I put Hearthstone into a lot of decks, just because I have a number of decks that do have activated abilities. I mean, Grenzo Dungeon Master is probably the most obvious situation where that comes up. But it is in a number of decks, and I like what the card does, but I wouldn't say it's a pet card. It's just a card that happens to have a handy ability and shows up in those decks. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing with Commander is that half the cards, or half the creatures generally, will have activated abilities while the others have triggered abilities. So, like, you know what? It's yeah. But yeah, so I guess I'll start out. My first one, funnily enough, is kind of similar to Hearthstone, but I like it. It's Joyra's Familiar. Joyra's Familiar is a 4-mana artifact creature bird, 2/2, flying, historic spells, which are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, cost 1 less to cast. I cracked this open in my first pre-release for Dominaria, and I immediately was like, oh, this could make all my commanders cheaper by 1. Granted, it's not that optimized. It's 4 mana for a 2/2 flying, which is okay. Here's Frankie.
Speaking of Frankie.
He heard me talking about other pets. So I opened this up at Dominaria pre-release, saw the great synergy it has with Commander tax, commanders in general. Mm-hmm. Also, Commander decks tend to run a lot of artifacts and legendaries, so I was like, this seems pretty solid. Seems good, but not like amazing. And it's a 2/2 flyer, so it helps block.
Yeah.
Helps chip in for that small amount of damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of fell in love with the card.
Nice.
It's a cute little owl.
Yeah. The Familiar is just not a card that I tend to think of when I'm putting my decks together.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a shame, because I do own them, and I run plenty of artifacts and obviously legendary creatures, so there's no reason not to be running it. I will say with my decks, I like to make sure I got a lot of flying creatures in there. It's easy built-in evasion.
Yeah, it's got the evasion. It also helps block flyers.
Mm-hmm.
it's a solid little dude that doesn't feel too bad to throw away in a Wrath, but really will help you if you need to play your commander a couple times, or any of your artifacts, legendaries, sagas if you have them. So that's my first pet
Makes
card.
good sense.
Yeah.
My first pet card is, I'm going to go with something a lot older than that. I'm going to go with Apprentice Wizard.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you at home who are sitting in front of your computer, if you look up Apprentice Wizard, please make sure you're looking at the dark version of Apprentice Wizard, because that's the one I was looking at. That's the one I like to play with when I first discovered the card, and it's basically the one I continue to use. Well, that and the white border 4th edition, but, let's all pretend that I was running black border, the dark, because, that would be the cooler one. I really like this because I found that it was just, this is ramp in blue.
Oh yeah.
And it's a pet card for me because most of the time when I play it, other people are like, what is that card? Because almost no one has ever seen it or heard of it. So there's a certain amount of surprise factor to it. To me, it screamed. It was the perfect magic card. I mean, are you kidding? It's a wizard. And he's still learning the craft, and the whole idea of it was just wonderful. And I liked that it was a 0/1 creature, so you knew it was going to die easy, but just the idea that play an island, tap him, and all of a sudden you've got 3 mana. That was just great. And then so I was always using it in blue decks as a form of ramp. I started running a lot more blue decks that ran a ton of artifacts. So whether I was running an Esper deck or just a mono blue artifact, the Apprentice Wizard was always showing up because it just proved to be really valuable. And it was just...
Yeah, if you're heavy on artifacts, you don't really need any fixing as much.
I mean, especially with mono blue. With mono blue, once you get 3 mana out, those are probably 3 islands. Well, you can play the Apprentice Wizard, and then on the next turn, you've got those 3 islands. You can change one of them into 3 regular mana, so now you're at 5, and that's without even a land drop. So, but I mean, I'm not really trying to sell the card as being, ramp replacement. I mean, it is a 0/1. It's pretty delicate. It doesn't give you any mana when you first play it. So, this is not an all-star card here, but I like it. I like everything about the card. I like the image. I like the throwback feel that it has for me. It's something that I enjoy.
Yeah, so. And I think with both of these cards, it's got this nice factor where your opponents aren't really going to use their targeted removal for it.
Well, yeah,
unless they're really
because this is
struggling.
Right, these are pet cards that are not they're not useless, but they're not uber powerful. They're not. Your opponent is going to look across the board and say, "Oh, that's got to go." I mean, they're not. They're just not. So.
And if it does get killed, I've got a little black pet card. It's common from Stronghold.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's a little old. It's called Tortured Existence. It's 1 black. It's an enchantment. I may have talked about this during our Temple's Treasures a couple of months back. But I put it in almost any black deck I have because it's, instant speed once you have it out.
It does great work.
It does amazing work. So what it says is, for a black, and choose and discard a creature card, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So if one of your key creatures just died, or if your commander just died and you've got this out on the board, it's really easy to get something big back from the graveyard by pitching something small. I mean, it's all about trading with the graveyard.
It's nice because it's a card that offers you graveyard recursion without really requiring your deck to have that as a theme. It can do it all on its own.
You don't need to build around this card.
Right, and as long as you're running creatures, it's going to work for you. You can use it to loop, say, if you've got a relatively inexpensive card that you have to sacrifice to get some ability. well, then you can, in the early game, you can take that big, huge 6 or 7 mana card, a creature, to get the cheaper one back to your hand so you can play it out and sack it to get the effect repeatedly in the early game. And in the late game, you get to flip that on its head. So you can take cards from your hand that just are not going to affect the board at the late stage and dump that in the graveyard to get out the big cards that are going to do work in the late stage. So it's a really nice setup. And yeah.
You know what this works really well in? Madness. If your creature's got madness, dump it, pay for it. Now you got a card back in your hand and a card on the battlefield.
Right.
It's a great card.
Yeah. No, this
highly recommend. Check it out.
Even the Stronghold version is 93 cents right now. So it's hardly something that's gonna break the bank for anybody.
Yeah.
My next one, I'm gonna stick with the mana ramp theme.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Felwar Stone.
Ooh.
Now, so Felwar Stone, again, strongly recommend you check out the 5th edition version, or the 4th, or...
Yeah. Wow, this went up in price. This needs a reprint.
Wow, it really did. Felwar Stone has gained in popularity because it keeps showing up in all the commander decks. And people are starting to realize now that if you play the Felwar Stone, you're almost certainly going to be able to tap it for any of the colors in your current deck, or at least for some of the colors. And quite honestly, if it taps for 3 or 4 of the colors that you might want, great. Felwar Stone is also really handy when you're playing decks where you steal opponents' creatures. Because the stone's going to make the color that you may need to activate that ability or to do something related to that. I love the Felwar Stone from pre-Commander days. I would happily run 2 or even 3 of these in decks when I was playing, a 60-card casual games with 3 other people, and where there was no restriction on color. So this was an easy way to get the colors I needed. Back then, Felwar Stone was inexpensive, and it was an easy way to get some early ramp. And most players just didn't seem to recognize the value that was coming out of Felwar Stone, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I put it in every deck constantly, just because at worst it's adding mana of a color that I didn't need. Well, it's still giving me mana, and it's 2. It only costs 2, and I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing the price being driven up. But as I said, this is a card that I've been using for a long time, and it was my go-to long before signets even existed. And I mean, realistically, if you can rely on your opponents to play a lot of colors, then the Felwar Stone is always going to be better than a signet. Now, that's not always the case, but
right. I mean, the chance, you obviously have a better chance of getting green or blue out of this, but you also have 3 opponents, so the chances of getting at least 4 colors is pretty high, at least mid game,
right?
And you're paying 2. Which is just like a signet. But the great thing about this is that you don't have to put 1 into it. Like signets, you have to tap with something else. And this just taps on its own. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Marvelous.
So it was
chef kiss.
It was an easy include in a lot of my decks, and it continues to be that way. I like Felwar Stone. It's basic, it's straightforward. And
seems like they are replacing it with Arcane Signet, but
I will say though, Felwar Stone, you don't have to be playing Commander to use it.
Yeah, that's true.
For the audience that doesn't realize it, Andy and I play in a group where, at least when we were playing in person, then roughly 50% of our games were 60-card games as opposed to Commander. So cards like Felwar Stone and other cards where you could do multiples were pretty valuable. An Arcane Signet's going to have less play in our 60-card decks than otherwise. But in any event, love me some Felwar Stone. Andy, what do you got?
I'll tell you right after this message. Let's go to break. We'll be right back after a brief ad from our sponsor. Be right back. This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Moon Eating Dog. Hey, put that down. No, down.
This episode of Temple of the False Pod is brought to you by Tortured Existence. For those times, in those days, when sometimes you just need a little something different. You need some strange. Go find it. It's likely dead. Just bring it back. It'll be fine. Just brush off the rot. Tortured Existence.
And now back to you.
Hey, we're back.
Hey, I know you. Yeah, so I guess it's my turn now.
Yeah.
My next one, it's white. It's an instant. It exiles. It's called Blessed Light. It's 4 and a white. It says exile target creature or enchantment.
Who knew or enchantment would cost 4 mana?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I guess technically you don't have to let them have a land, and you don't give them life either. So there's that.
Yeah. It's not good.
So
it's not good.
Right, but why is this your pet card? Is there a reason?
I don't know. I opened it during my Dominar pre-release. You can sense a theme here.
Mm-hmm.
And I like... I mean, everyone's going to, give the white player the benefit of the doubt anyway. Leaving 5 mana open is a lot. But also having this at instant is pretty good. I mean, like, obviously there are Swords of Plowshare, Path to Exile. The fact that this hits enchantments is pretty good. Not enough people run enchantment removal. The fact that this exiles is pretty good. Granted, the two cards I just mentioned also exile. But yeah, it's a thing people won't expect. Granted, at 5 mana, they could expect anything. So,
I find it interesting just because I like the as an older school player. Generally speaking, white offers up creature removal or creature exile, and then it was artifact and enchantment. And Wizards has sort of gotten away from that whole white getting rid of artifacts thing and shifted it more into these two slots.
Yeah.
So the idea that, instead of disenchant, which was artifact or enchantment, now it's Blessed Light, and it was sort of creature or enchantment. I just like the feel of how that works because, it's like Wizards is saying, we're moving away from this, but you know what? We'll give you a nod to the past in that we're still going to let you choose 2 different kinds of permanent to get rid of. I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing that I like about this is that it's flexible, which is great. But it also, like, white has the tendency to play the political game. Like, oh, I'm going to take this from you, but you get this thing instead,
Right.
Whether it's life from swords, a land from Path to Exile, an elephant from Generous Gift. This, for a little extra mana, you don't give them anything. And I think that's pretty cool. It feels like a very clean card,
right?
Design wise, and there's no breaking this. It's just, it is what it is. You do the thing, and it's done. Yeah, I like it.
Nice.
It's I try to force it into my white decks as often as possible. I really like this in 60 card, where you just kind of want.
Where you have fewer card options, so you want your cards to do multiple things, and you'll pay a little extra to make it happen. I like that.
Yeah. What's your next one?
Well, let's continue down the path of all things white, and
this will give me a long path.
It could be. This is my next card is a little older. It's originally from Mirage. And it's called Sacred Mesa.
Ooh. Just kidding. I don't know what it does.
Sacred Mesa. It's a 3 mana enchantment, 2 and a white.
Okay.
And it says, I'm gonna do the Oracle text. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Sacred Mesa unless you sacrifice a Pegasus. Now, for 1 and a white, you can create a 1/1 white Pegasus creature token with flying. The reason that this is a pet card for me is because I opened 3 of these during Mirage. And I think I may have cracked, I don't know, 15 or 20 packs of Mirage total. So the odds of getting 3 of them, because they are rare, is not good. But, and I would suggest that most people would say to me that I have incredibly bad luck to be stuck with 3 of these cards. But I like the card. It's relatively benign, and you get a lot of people who will try and get rid of it by killing off any Pegasus you might have, and then saying, haha, it's going to die on your upkeep. Well, you can always tap more mana at the start of your upkeep.
Right.
It says it's a 3 mana card, but you can't cast it when you only have 3. Because if you do, then on their next turn, you have to spend 2 just to keep it around. And you have to spend 2 every turn to keep it around. So this thing just eats up your mana horribly. You don't want that. So you're going to want to wait until you've probably got 5 mana at least, and then go from there. But I ran a lot of decks that, virtually any deck that could abuse a token strategy always sees one of these in the deck. And it's probably silly because there are far more effective ways to run tokens, but I like this one. I like the idea of a 1/1 flyer. And, it's not a spirit. It's something different.
Yeah.
Magic doesn't have enough Pegasus in it. I found all kinds of ways to try and make this happen. And it was just, it was just a fun card that I enjoyed using. And often you can, wait until your opponent's last turn and then funnel all of your mana in there to make Pegasus tokens. I mean, I had a handful of games that I can think of where I had more than 15 or 20 of these tokens, and that I had gotten them the hard way. I literally poured the mana in to get them. So it was always a blast to use, and it was always fun when an opponent saw an opportunity and they were like, haha, you don't have your Sacred Mesa anymore. And then on the next turn, I just put out another one. Because, ha! Surprise. So it was, that sort of thing was something I enjoyed doing. And I still like putting it in decks nowadays. A 1/1 flyer is a great chump blocker. If you need fodder, you can always add more. It's, it's a fun card to have. I wouldn't say that I'm a big fan of Margaret Organ Keen's work, but this is definitely one of my favorites. So
good.
Yeah. Andy, what do you got?
My next one, we'll just keep going down that white path. It's called On Sarah's Wings. This has gotten a reprint in Commander Legends, but got its first printing in Dominaria. It's 3 and a white. It's a legendary enchantment aura. Enchanted creature is legendary. Gets +1/+1. Has flying, vigilance, and lifelink. It's all the things you want in a white creature, and it just kind of gives it to them for 4 mana. This card I cracked in my very first pre-release, Dominaria. Threw it on Atraxis, slammed in for heck of a lot of damage.
Yeah. Vigilance on Traxxas.
Vigilance on Traxxas, flying on Traxxas, +1/+1, and lifelink. So I ended up getting 8 life. It was a 16-point swing. It was beautiful. The fact, it gives flying, vigilance, lifelink. It's all great. The fact that it gives legendary is less great, but I'm sure there's something there. I guess so. Where this does come in handy is I know specifically Blackblade Reforged has a different equip cost if the creature's legendary, but that's I mean, there are a handful of synergies that care about Legendary, but it's excellent. Especially with Jorah's Familiar, it costs one less. If you're playing an enchantment deck, I'm sure you can get it down to just a single white. Yeah, it's powerful. Vigilance and Lifelink together is a very fun combination.
Oh, you don't have to sell me on this.
Yeah. I love to throw this in most white decks.
I'm old school. I like the idea of, creating your own Sarah Angel. So
yeah. Is your next card also white?
Why, yes, it is.
Wow.
We're going to go with a card that most people have probably heard of. Divine Visitation. Now,
what's that?
Divine Visitation is a 5-mana enchantment, 3 and 2 white. It says if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. Now,
speak of the angel.
Exactly.
It just makes you a bunch of Sarah Angels.
Right.
It's crazy.
Divine Visitation is a pet card just because I love token creatures. I love token creatures. I make sapperlings. You name the token, I'm generally in favor of building a deck that will make it. I mean, I always laughed when this card first came out. I thought, well, this combos with so many cards. So many cards, and you could put it in any white deck, because eventually your white deck is going to make a soldier token. It's going to, you are going to get a beast token, or so what I did was do this daily thing on Twitter, and it was, you can look it up. It's the hashtag is Daily Divine Visitation Vespers, all one word. I know it's a mouthful, but I like alliteration.
I'll link it below too. Yeah,
I like alliteration, and so every day for I don't know how long.
It was very long.
It was very long. I think I got to 200 cards. I can't recall, but it was a long time. And I just I would put Divine Visitation out, and then I would choose a card that made a token or somehow benefited from Divine Visitation. Now, most of the time, it's because it made a token. So, let's say Deranged Hermit makes a bunch of squirrels. Well, instead of making 4 1/1 squirrels that become 2/2 squirrels with Deranged Hermit, you make 4 4/4 angels with vigilance and flying. Well, suddenly that Deranged Hermit is now something of a prophet. Borderline god making 4/4 angels. But, so I would include that card in a picture on Twitter, and I would post it that day. And the next day, I would find a different card and post that. And the next day was a different card and posted that. And I kept this up for 200 days of finding magic cards that comboed profitably with another card and posted it on Twitter. And I did this every day for a very long time.
Yeah.
I only stopped because it was a combination of either boredom or just ran out of steam. I guarantee you there's at least 100 more cards that will combo with Divine Visitation, because Wizards can't get away from making token creatures. And almost all the token creatures that get made aren't as good as a 4/4 flying vigilance angel. But it's been a lot of fun running this card. And having said that, it really hasn't come up in my gameplay very often. It doesn't show up that often in games. I got it in a couple of decks, but it just never seems to be there. Or make more than a couple of tokens, and then it's just sort of done. So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe you did it from the middle of December 2018 to end of May 2019.
Okay, so
almost every day.
So 6 months. It was probably 5 days a week. I don't know that I did it on the weekends. But for 6 months at 5 days a week, yeah. I mean,
yeah. I'll post a link to a Twitter search for it. But my favorites are the ones you did at the beginning of April as kind of like an April Fool's joke, where it does end up being a non-bow.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are going to be examples where it doesn't work very well. But
Mirror Lage, Sacred Mesa, there's all sorts of decks where the focus is on a specific creature type. So, I mean, there are soldier decks where soldiers always get the bonus to the point where your soldiers would be bigger than your angels. Well, okay, so obviously those are, not the best situation, but yeah. So, I mean, it's not perfect every time, but a big chunk of the time, Divine Visitation will do work, and I love the idea that some of the cards are just sort of, it's comical when you picture the card in like a story mode. Put on your Vorthos hat. So the idea of Doomed Traveler, when he is killed, then his spirit comes, and his spirit is now there. Well, that's great. But now you take that story, and Doomed Traveler dies, and then comes back as an avenging angel looking to crush you. I mean, that's a different story. And there are so many times when you're getting an innocuous token, and suddenly you're not getting an innocuous token. Mere Battlesphere? Now, yes, it would be nice to be able to take those mirror and tap them to do the damage with the Mere Battlesphere, but on the other hand, Mere Battlesphere with 4/4/4 angels that fly, there's nothing wrong with that. So it just, it changes the story in your head a little, and I got a kick out of that, and I still like the card. So
yeah.
But yeah, Divine Visitation. So
my last one
yeah.
has white in it, but it's not from Dominaria. It's Ethereal Absolution. It's an enchantment that says creatures you control get +1/+1. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-1. And then for 2 white/black, you can exile target creature from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature card, you create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. I've had a lot of fun with this card. So much so that I try to force it into every white/black deck I have. Obviously, great in
a Divine Visitation deck?
Yeah, in a Divine Visitation deck. In my Tesa deck, which actually, I think I need to put it back in. Don't tell anyone, but I think I took it out. Because it's 6 mana.
Right.
But it pumps up tokens extremely well. It clears your opponent's boards fairly well. And the fact that its activated ability is, not restricted to sorcery speed is amazing. You can do it in response to somebody trying to take a creature out of their graveyard. Which feels mean, but it's the game.
It works.
And especially at 4 mana, it sometimes is hard to get there. But if you have nothing else to do with your mana, which I have been stuck with plenty of times in things like my Tesa deck, it gives you a little spirit, as long as your opponents have creatures in their graveyard. Or in their graveyard. It's a fun one.
Yeah. I'm going to wrap this one up with another old school card. And this is going to be one of those cards that people are going to be looking. They're going to look at. They're going to say, that's cool. Where can I get one? And then I'm going to say, you can't because, reserve list.
What could
reserve list,
be?
massive pricing, all kinds of stuff.
Is this... Do I know what this is?
I suspect you do.
Have we talked about this on the...
I talk about this card all the time. I rave about this card. This card is so good. It is criminally underplayed. I wish that Wizards had a way to reprint this card. It does so much work, and there are very few cards out there that can do what this card does. This is Tombstone Stairwell. It costs 4 mana. It's 2 and 2 black. And I'll read the Oracle text because reading the regular text is just difficult. Okay, so it has a cumulative upkeep of 1 and a black. Don't worry about that cumulative upkeep. Just don't worry about it. This card's worth it. Trust me on this. At the beginning of each upkeep, each upkeep, not your upkeep, each upkeep. If Tombstone Stairwell is on the battlefield, each player creates a 2/2 black zombie creature token with haste named Tombspawn. That's right, your zombie tokens have a name. And you get one for each creature in their graveyard. Now, at the beginning of each end step, or when Tombstone Stairwell leaves the battlefield, destroy all tokens created with Tombstone Stairwell. They can't be regenerated. What this means, how it actually plays out, is you play the stairwell. Nothing happens. Your next opponent, or the next player, starts their turn. On their upkeep, before they even draw a card, everybody counts the creature cards in their graveyards. And they get that many 2/2 zombie tokens, named Tombspawn.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody's got all these tokens. They all have haste. That player goes through their turn. Now, if they want to attack, they're welcome to. If they don't want to, they don't have to. They've got 2/2 zombie tokens there for however many creatures are in their graveyard. At the end of their turn, all of these Tombspawn tokens die. So now, with tokens, that does mean they go to the graveyard. Obviously, they're tokens. The card doesn't sit there. But they do go to the graveyard. So they activate any abilities where it says when a creature dies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens then? The next person takes their turn, and we do it all over again. All right. Right off the bat, let me introduce you to, or let me remind you of Blood Artist. So Blood Artist. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life.
And that's anybody's creature.
Right. So what happens on your first opponent's end step, when all of these tokens die? Let's say there's only 4 of you playing. Let's say there's only 8 tokens. Let's say that each person only has 2 creatures in their creature cards in their graveyard. That means I get to decide who loses 8 life, and I gain 8 life. And that's only if there's only 8 creature cards in the graveyard. If you're playing Tombstone Stairwell, you're loading your graveyard. You by yourself probably have 4 or 5 creature cards in your graveyard. 1 round of mass removal will add another 6 cards, 7 creatures. Realistically, you're looking at 10 or 12 creatures dying on each person's turn. So by the time it gets back to you, 40 creatures have likely died in that period of time. So with 1 little lame Blood Artist, you can have dealt 40 damage and gained 40 life. Now you can spread the damage around any way you want because it's 1 life at a time. It doesn't have to be all to 1 player. You do it however you want. But you can beat the tar out of a table in 1 round. Even with, as I said, with only 8 creatures in the graveyard. Because that's 8 damage every single turn. With only 8 creatures, you're doing 32 damage in 1 round of play. And gaining 32 life. And that's with just a Blood Artist. There's a handful of other cards that can do it better than the Blood Artist. I mean, all you find a card that does a point of damage to every player every time a creature goes to the graveyard. Yeah. And this is just the Blood Artist portion. There are think of all the cards that, like, think of creatures that get a +1/+1 counter every time a creature goes to the graveyard. Think about all these situations where you can get a bonus if a creature goes to the graveyard. There's tons of them. It's ridiculous how effective this card is at doing this. And this doesn't even consider, if you're loading the graveyard and you have 5 creatures and each of your opponents only have 2 in their graveyard, it means you have 5 Tombspawn tokens and they only each have 2. Send all 5 at somebody. You do 6 points of damage because they can't block it all.
Yeah.
And who cares if the creatures die? they're dying at the end of the turn anyway. You're going to get more. So
beautiful.
Just keep burning them. And, it's just, okay, you want to do a wrath effect and kill off my blood artist? Fine. I've got other stuff in hand. I'll make it work. And if it just means that you're adding more tomb spawn, I'll run you over with those too. They are zombie tokens, so if you want to run just a straight zombie deck, you can certainly do that with these, and they'll ramp things through the roof. There's so many ways to use Tombstone Stairwell, and like I said, I'm just describing one of them. I have run these cards in so many different decks. I love this card. Love it. It just does great work. The real downside to this card, it's only been printed in Mirage, and we've seen a significant price spike. So it's about 18,
it's close to 20.
Yeah, somewhere around $20. Sorry, folks, if you weren't able to get in on this ahead of time, but hey, it's
maybe your playgroup likes proxies.
And I will say, if anything, the cumulative upkeep is a bonus for this. So many players look at this and say, let me wait and see if he pays the upkeep.
2's nothing.
So they will wait and let you get all of these zombies into play and out of play and into play and out of play. I mean, just a carrion feeder. And that's only your tokens. But yeah, sure, boom, you feed them off every single time, and that carrion feeder's getting all these +1/+1 counters. There's all kinds of benefits, but the players will let it get all the way to your turn and wait to see if you play the upkeep before they use removal. And then they're like, oh, you're going to pay the upkeep? Great! And now I'll disenchant it. I'm like, okay. So I paid 2 mana to keep this in play for the entire round, because they're not willing to. They didn't want to use their enchantment removal until I paid the upkeep. They wanted to see me spend a little more mana. I'm like, okay. That was built into this. It just meant that I got all of these activations because you were trying to get just a little more value out of your thing. You gave me a ton of value, more than I expected. So, bonus. And I don't think I've ever paid the upkeep more than twice. I don't think I've ever paid 6 mana. Yeah, I will say, if you're playing a 60 card or have some way to make multiple copies of the Stairwell is also a world enchantment, which means that if there's another world enchantment in play, it goes away. It dies. So you can't have more than one world enchantment in play. So, don't try and duplicate it. Just, be happy you're getting one and don't go too far there. Tombstone Stairwell is just a great card, and it's definitely one of my early pet cards. I've been stuffing this in black decks for a very long time. Andy, that's all I got.
That's all I got. I think it's plenty long enough. If you ever want to meet Frankie, let me know. I'll send you a picture, dear listener. I think that's going to do it for us tonight. If you have a pet card that you really want to share with us, let us know. We're on Twitter at FalsePodMTG. We got an email address, falsepodmtg@gmail.com. We've got an Instagram, also FalsePodMTG. Thanks for hanging out today. We're Temple of Falsepod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Sure as heck are fun? Sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Have a great day, and may your fifth land be the temple.
Bye!
Hey everyone, Andy here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Temple of the Falsepod. Just a few housekeeping things here at the end of the show. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe and give us a review. It really helps out the show. And it'll show us what you like about our podcast. Also, we've got a Twitter, and an Instagram. Our handle is falsepodmtg, all one word, so be sure to follow us. Feel free to reach out to us there or drop us an email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com and tell us your favorite magic-related story. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again to you and to Bruce. He's Mana Burned on Twitter, and I'm Andy Weekend on Twitter and Twitch. We're Temple of the Falsepod, where our decks aren't optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. Have a great night, and may your fifth land be the temple.